The following compilation features unsettling and spine-chilling tales sourced from Reddit's horror communities. Reader discretion is strongly advised. These narratives may contain graphic descriptions, psychological distress, and themes that could unsettle sensitive individuals. Proceed with caution, as immersion into these eerie stories may provoke fear, unease, and sleep disturbances. Enter this realm of Reddit's creepy horror stories at your own risk, as the line between reality and the macabre may blur within these chilling narratives. I used to be a trucker, was for about 10 years I think. I don't do driving anymore, try to limit as much as I can, even outside of work. Now, I don't have a fear of driving, I have a fear of destinations. Every time you get into a car, you have a destination in mind, a place you want to go. Even if you don't have a specific place in mind, that place is just a way. The saying, "It's about the journey, not the destination." Bullshit. When is the car ride to your vacation spot the fun part of the trip? Never. Usually just awkwardly quiet. That's besides the point though. What I hate the most though is driving through the Midwest. I swear, every single one of those towns is just the same. Identical, cookie cutter, gas station, few neighborhoods, corner store. Once you've seen one, you've seen them all. It's midsummer. I've been going through miles and miles of just cornfields as far as the eye can see. Flat fields of corn, oddly beautiful during the day, like a sea of green spreading out there. During the night, though, you can only imagine what might be hiding in those corn stalks. As a trucker, you have to remain vigilant. If something, or for some godforsaken reason, someone were to dart out, I wouldn't be able to stop. Just don't like the fields at night. I'm on Route 23, somewhere between Iowa and Nebraska, and it's getting dark. When it gets dark in the Midwest, all you have is the lights on your truck and the light of the moon. Here's something you might not know. The majority of large truck crashes happen in rural areas. I personally have had some of my closest calls in rural areas. Just nothing for miles, not even a turn in the road, and your brain basically just starts to turn off, go on autopilot. Never a good thing when your mind starts to wander while operating a 30-ton killing machine. So when I start to get tired, I start to look for a place to rest for the night. That's what I was doing when I stumbled across exit 202. I had driven down this route a good few times before, but this exit was new to me. I just figured there might have been some new development since the last time I had been down the route. I was curious, tired and hungry, so I took the exit and headed down the road. Corn. That's all I can say. Corn. This road was narrow, a struggle to stay in my lane as the highway ended and gave way to a mostly neglected road, unkempt and rough. Looking into the distance, there was nothing. No lights, no buildings, not even another car on the road. Just corn. So much corn. Then that's when I saw it. A small clearing on the side of the road, with a large neon pink sign beckoning me closer. Mabel's Diner. Getting closer, it looked like it was on its last legs. The light was dim, flickering in the night. From what I could see from the safety of my truck, the diner looked rusted and near decrepit. Although an open sign and lights within, with nowhere else to go, I hopped out of my truck and entered the building. As I entered, a weak-sounding bell heralded my entry. The place was nearly empty, with a few patrons who barely even looked up from their plates as I walked in. The waitress behind the counter looked at me with a dull gaze. This poor woman seemed exhausted, as if she had been working here as long as the building had been. Her name tag was only more proof of this. Reading Mabel. I just asked for the house special, and she served me some pretty basic eggs and sausage with a tired smile. My nose began to sniffle. I've always had allergies. Something about this place, though, was especially bad. Like stuck in a hayloft bad. My nose just would not stop leaking, my eyes were starting to water, and I was severely starting to regret not taking my allergy medicine earlier. As I ate, my mind began to wander. The food was just forgettable. It was sustaining but utterly unfulfilling. Makes sense why the place looked so worn down. Who would come all the way out here for this? That's when a big feeling of unease began to creep into my chest. The place was silent. Not a single noise. There is always noise no matter where you go. Scraping of utensils on plates, quiet murmuring, hell, even the humming of lights or even a fly buzzing past. The place was just utterly silent. I quickly paid for my meal, throwing down a wad of cash as I left, leaving all of the disheveled patrons behind me. I walked out into that pitch-black parking lot and came to a terrible realization. The parking lot was empty. Not a single vehicle was out there, including my truck. It was gone. I was stranded in this horrible place. I pulled out my phone, tried calling my boss, and of course, because I'm in the middle of nowhere, no signal and no escape. I heard a faint jingle of a bell opening and a cold voice cutting through my chest. "Mabel," she said to me. "Oh dear, your truck gone. Come on in, stay a while. We'll call someone for you." She stood so still in the doorframe, a silhouette dimly lit by the dingy light behind her. When people stand still, they still move. Their chest rises and falls as they breathe, maybe a drum of their fingers against their leg, a small shifting back and forth in their stance. But she was deathly still, like a mannequin. It wasn't just that, but her voice just sounded wrong, flat, hollow. I was filled with a sense of dread, like if I followed along with her, I would not be leaving that diner. So I slowly turned around and began walking back the way I came. Maybe if I made it back to the highway, I could hail someone down and get to a place to fill in my boss and figure out what to do about my truck. And I walked, and I walked, and I walked, and I walked. The corn all around me, so utterly alone. It was dark. No lights, no nothing. Just the rustling of corn and the moonlight to guide me. Then I heard that piercing voice again. "Stay a while. We'll keep you company." I spun around, and there she stood, standing in the road, deathly still. "Stay a while." Meh. The corn to my sides shifted as some of the patrons of the bar slowly made their way out. Now, looking closer, I came to a terrible realization. The reason they were silent, the reason they didn't even seem to breathe. In the glimmer of the moonlight, as they approached me, I saw what they really were. Their skin was stretched tight, more of a mask than their own flesh. Peeking from underneath the seams of their skin, around their neck, was straw, poking out from between the stitches that held them together. They grabbed me, holding on to me with a strength I had never felt before. Mabel just got closer and closer to me. I trashed against their grip, screaming and crying against the men who were holding me back. Mabel only got closer, her cold, dead eyes staring into me. "Stay a while." Her hand stretched out, touching my neck, an icy stillness spreading through my body. Adrenaline is one hell of a drug. I kicked her right in the stomach with all of my strength. It was like kicking a brick wall. She stumbled back, looking more confused than shocked. The men's grip on my loosened just barely enough, and I broke loose, running as fast as I could for the highway. My heart pounding, adrenaline coursing through, letting me push past the ache and pain of my joints and my ragged gasping for air. I kept running and running past the burn of my lungs and the tightness of my throat. After what felt like an eternity, I finally saw headlights in the distance. I waved my arms, screaming until my voice gave out, and he stopped for me. I explained my situation, that someone was trying to kill me. He let me into his car and started driving to a nearby town, toward the diner. I began to panic, to tell him to turn around to the highway, that the people who attacked me were this way. And he looked at me confused, that the highway was nowhere nearby, that there was no Mabel's diner, that there was no exit 202. A feeling of pure fear flooded me. We drove for a while, and as I saw the lights of the town in the distance, the man was right. There were no signs of my assailants. There were no signs of the diner, no signs of my truck. The cornfields ended, and I was greeted by a small Midwestern town. The man dropped me off at the local police station, and I gave them my statement. I called my boss about the situation, and they sent someone in the area to swing by and bring me back home. When I got back and tried reporting my truck and all its details, they gave me the most confusing revelation yet. My truck was still in the garage. Only when I went to check on it, it wasn't the same truck. Different license plate, The color was a different shade, and the keys in my pocket did not work on this one. I brought it up to my supervisor, and he looked just as confused as I did. The keys didn't go to any truck in the garage, or any on the record ever. I still have the keys now, not sure what to do with them. I quit pretty soon after, not a big fan of leaving my town, much less the state, especially those cornfields. God, I hate those cornfields. I'm just trying to separate from it all. I'm worried that this might be a curse for me, because on the highway to get my groceries today, I saw an exit 143. And despite all the information I look for it online, there is no exit 143. I never should have bought it. That bag, its texture, its warmth, something about it felt so wrong from the moment I touched it, but I was too mesmerized by its strange beauty. I found it in an old antique shop, hidden behind dusty shelves. The shopkeeper barely glanced at me as I picked it up, murmuring something about how it had been there for years, untouched. I should have left it there, in the darkness where it belonged. But I didn't, and now I'm paying the price. It started small, little things. At first I thought I was imagining it. You know, those small, creepy feelings you get when you're alone, like the air shifts, or the shadows bend just a little bit differently. Yeah, like that. But it didn't stay small for long. After the first night, I began hearing faint whispers. They were soft, barely noticeable, like someone calling my name from another room. I'd searched the house, but it was always empty. The bag was always where I'd left it, sitting quietly in the corner like a patient predator. On the third night, I had my first nightmare. I dreamt of a girl, her skin peeled away, her face contorted in pain and rage. She stood at the foot of my bed, her eyes hollow, her lips whispering things I couldn't understand. I woke up in a cold sweat, and there, sitting next to me on the bed, was the bag. I hadn't put it there. It had moved, on its own. I was too scared to touch it, too scared to throw it away. I couldn't sleep. The whispers grew louder every night, creeping into my thoughts, turning every dark corner of my mind into a nightmare. My house, it changed too. The windows would fog up without reason, the mirrors would crack when I wasn't looking, and every time I checked my reflection, I swear I saw her, the girl from my dreams. Aisha, I later learned her name was. The name came to me in a whisper, like the wind spoke it. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers, I needed help. Desperation led me to a shaman, an old woman who lived on the outskirts of town. I didn't believe in such things before, but I couldn't deny what was happening. Something unnatural had latched itself onto me, and that bag was at the center of it all. The moment the shaman laid eyes on the bag, her face twisted in horror. Her hands trembled as she reached out to touch it, pulling back at the last second. "You have no idea what you've brought into your home," she whispered, her voice thin with fear. I tried to explain everything, the whispers, the dreams, the moving bag, but she stopped me, shaking her head. "This bag, it's not just cursed, it's evil. It was made from the skin of a girl named Aisha, killed by her best friend out of jealousy. The friend, Samantha, believed she could steal Aisha's beauty by wearing her skin, but the act twisted her soul. What she didn't realize was that Aisha's spirit was bound to it, and her vengeance consumes anyone who possesses it." My throat went dry. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Vengeance?" I stammered. The shaman nodded, her eyes wide and filled with a terror I had never seen before. "Samantha's entire household was slaughtered by the bag. It's cursed, feeding on the lives of those who own it. Aisha's rage will not stop until she's taken back what was stolen." I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick, heavy. "What do I do? Can't you help me?" The old woman's face darkened. "There's no undoing what's been done. You must destroy it." "How?" She shook her head, already looking defeated. "You can't. People have tried. Fire, water, even burying it deep in the earth. It always comes back. The only thing you can do is run as far as you can, but even then, I'm not sure you can outrun her." I left her home in a panic, clutching the bag in my hands, unsure of what to do. The streets seemed darker as I walked, every shadow seeming to stretch towards me. I could feel it. Aisha was close. She was watching. That night, I tried to leave the bag outside, thinking maybe I could abandon it. But the moment I stepped back into the house, it was there, sitting in the middle of the room, waiting. The whispers were louder than ever, now calling my name over and over again. I don't know what to do. Every time I close my eyes, I see her, Aisha, her skinless body, her hollow eyes filled with hate. The bag seems to move closer on its own, inching toward me, always a little closer when I'm not looking. I can feel it tightening around my mind, like a noose I can't escape. The shaman was right. There's no escaping this. The bag will take me, just like it took Samantha and everyone else. I just hope someone reads this before it's too late. If you ever find an old leather bag in a forgotten shop, no matter how beautiful it seems, don't touch it, don't buy it, don't take it home. It will find you. And when it does, there will be no escaping its curse. I was pacing around my bedroom that night, restless and unable to sleep. Every creak in the old house made me glance over my shoulder, and every shadow seemed to stretch a little longer than usual. Maybe it was just nerves. Maybe it was just another one of those nights where your imagination runs wild and everything feels wrong. I couldn't shake the unease gnawing at me, so I kept moving, until a scream tore through the silence. It was sharp and desperate, a sound that made my skin prickle and my blood run cold. I froze, straining to hear, my heart hammering against my chest. Was it my imagination? A figment of my anxiety playing tricks on me? Then I heard it again. A raw, agonizing scream, followed by the unmistakable sounds of someone struggling. Something inside me tightened. My feet felt like they were stuck in quicksand, but somehow I made my way to the window, every step heavy with dread. What I saw made my stomach lurch. There, in the dim glow of a street lamp, my neighbor was thrashing on the ground, blood pooling beneath him. A man stood over him, his face hidden in shadow, but I could see the glint of steel in his hand as he drove it down again and again. My neighbor's voice broke with each stab, his shouts growing weaker, fading into pitiful whimpers. And the man, he was smiling, lips curled back in a grotesque grin. He was enjoying it. Every single second. I wanted to scream, to shout, to do something, but I couldn't. I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear, watching in helpless horror as my neighbor's life was taken from him in a brutal, bloody act of violence. I tried to look away, but it was like my eyes were glued to the scene, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. When it was over, the silence was worse. My neighbor lay lifeless, a crumpled heap on the ground, his blood staining the pavement like spilled ink. The killer straightened up, wiped his blade clean on the body's clothes, and turned. My heart stopped as his gaze drifted up, locking onto my window. Our eyes met. For a second, it felt like time itself froze. A shiver of pure, primal terror shot through me as the killer's lips stretched into a slow, deliberate smile. He lifted his weapon, pointing it directly at me like a promise. My breath caught. "You're next." That was all I needed to snap out of my trance. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over myself as I fumbled for my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I dialed 911, pressed call, and nothing. No network. I glanced at the screen in disbelief, and my heart sank. What the hell? Then, just as I was trying again, the lights flickered once, twice, and died, plunging the house into pitch darkness. My breath hitched, the darkness suddenly feeling thick and suffocating. I knew it wasn't just a power outage. I was being isolated, cut off from help. Panicked, I ran to the kitchen and yanked open the drawers, my fingers scrambling for anything I could use to defend myself. I found a knife, small but sharp, my only lifeline. Clutching it tightly, I made another desperate attempt to call the police. Still no network. I swallowed hard, the cold blade trembling in my grip. My mind was racing. What should I do? I ran outside, shouting for help. My voice echoed down the empty street. A pathetic cry swallowed by the oppressive silence. "Somebody, please, help!" There was no answer. No lights flicking on in the neighboring houses. No one came out. No one heard me. Or maybe no one wanted to hear me. And then I saw him, standing at the edge of my yard, his silhouette sharp and menacing against the darkness. My breath hitched. He took a step forward, and I stumbled back, raising my knife. I don't want any trouble," I stammered, trying to sound braver than I felt. "I've got a knife too." But the words were weak, my voice a pitiful whisper in the face of his calm, confident menace. The killer's grin widened, and he lunged. Fear shot through me, and I turned and ran, sprinting around the side of my house. He followed, footsteps heavy and relentless. I was running on pure adrenaline, legs burning as I darted through the backyard, the darkness swallowing me whole. I turned a corner, heart hammering in my throat, and realized I was trapped. The fence loomed high behind me. The killer closed in, his sword gleaming in the faint moonlight. My back was against the wall, literally. I was cornered. And then I spotted it. A rock. It wasn't much, but it was something. I hurled my knife at him, a desperate move to buy time, and when he dodged, I scooped up the rock and threw it with all my strength. It hit him square in the chest, knocking him back a step. I didn't think. I tackled him, sending us both crashing to the ground. For a second I thought I had a chance. Then he kicked out, catching me by the ankle as I tried to scramble away. He yanked me down, his blade flashing dangerously close. I kicked blindly, catching him in the face, and somehow I was on my feet again. But he was on his feet too, and there was no time to think, only to act. I spun around, desperate to find an escape route. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. My chest was heaving, sweat and fear mingling in my eyes. The killer stepped forward, almost casually, as if savoring the moment. He swung his blade with terrifying precision, and I barely managed to dodge, feeling the air slice past my face. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. In a desperate move, I lunged at him, trying to push him back, but he was strong, far stronger than I'd imagined. He swatted me aside like I was nothing, and I hit the ground hard. Pain shot up my back, my vision blurring for a moment. But I couldn't give up now. I had to survive. I had to fight. I scrambled to my feet just as he raised his sword for another strike. I braced myself, ready to dodge. But then, a flash of headlights. A car turned the corner, its beams cutting through the darkness like a lifeline. Without thinking, I dashed out into the street, waving my arms frantically. "Help! Please help!" I shouted, voice breaking. The car screeched to a halt, barely missing me. I could see the driver's wide-eyed expression of shock as he rolled down the window. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, but I barely heard him. "Someone's trying to kill me," I blurted out, pointing wildly toward the shadows where the killer lurked. "You have to help me, please." Before I could finish, the killer stepped out of the darkness, calm as ever, the sword hanging loosely at his side. He was watching us, almost amused. The driver's eyes widened in horror. He fumbled with his door handle, stepping out of the car. "Get in, we've got a—" But it was too late. The killer moved like lightning, lunging at the driver with brutal efficiency. I didn't think. I just reacted. I shoved the driver aside, and the blade that was meant for him sliced through the air inches from my face. I stumbled back, barely catching myself. "Get in the car!" I shouted at the driver, but he didn't move. He was frozen, staring at the killer with a mix of terror and disbelief. And then, somehow, he snapped out of it. He charged at the killer, a move that was as brave as it was foolish. The killer sidestepped easily, sending the driver sprawling to the ground. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I scrambled into the driver's car, slamming the door behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. The keys were still in the ignition. I twisted them, the engine roaring to life. My eyes flicked to the side mirror, and I saw the killer looming over the driver, raising his sword for the final blow. "No!" I shouted, jerking the car into reverse. Tires screeched as I floored the gas pedal. The car shot backward, and I felt the sickening thud as I hit something. Someone. The killer's face twisted in pain as he was thrown to the ground. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then, before he could get up, I shifted into drive and gunned it, the car lurching forward. The killer tried to move, but the front tires caught him square in the chest, crushing him beneath the car's weight. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I drove until I was sure he wasn't getting back up. The car bounced and jolted as I ran over his body again and again, my vision blurred by tears and adrenaline. Finally, I skidded to a stop, hands still clenched around the steering wheel. The silence was deafening. Slowly, I turned off the engine. The driver was sitting up now, staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. I stepped out of the car, legs trembling beneath me, and looked down at what was left of the killer. He lay twisted and broken on the pavement, his sword lying inches from his outstretched hand. I killed him," I whispered, the words feeling hollow and unreal. My mind was spinning, struggling to process what had just happened. The driver stumbled to his feet, his gaze shifting between me and the mangled body. "You saved me," he said hoarsely, voice thick with shock. "You saved us both." I shook my head slowly, still staring down at the killer's lifeless form. It didn't feel like a victory. It didn't feel real. I'd just been trying to survive. But now, as I stood there in the aftermath, a chill crept up my spine. Because in the darkness, behind the fear, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. It's now been a couple of weeks since then. I kind of hate everyone in my neighborhood. It was a cold winter afternoon the day that I died. My parents had taken me out to skate on the lake. I'd begged them all morning and watched in horror as the ice cracked beneath me. My father had tried to save me, but it wasn't meant to be. I don't know what I was expecting. A bright light? Pearly gates. But there was nothing. I just stayed, unable to move on. I watched them as they grieved. They struggled as you'd expect. My mother made all the funeral arrangements, but she was completely emotionless. It was like all her light had been snuffed out. All of our family tried to offer condolences, but they slid right off of her with no reaction except the expected words. My father was worse. He became disconsolate. He barely left the house except on days when I'd see him sitting at the lake, staring out at the place where I'd fallen through, and he'd been unable to save me. He shouldn't have blamed himself. I didn't, but he did anyway. I never blamed him or Mom. It wasn't their fault. I just wished I weren't so alone. As you'd expect, with a wife who shut down emotionally and a husband who couldn't stop hating himself, their marriage began to suffer. Friends and family tried to help, but there was nothing they could say. My father returned to work, but was a shell of himself. My mother went through the motions, but began sleeping every night in my room. I wished so much that there was something I could do, but I wasn't really there. My wishes, like my body, were immaterial. They kept drifting further and further apart, living two separate lives in the same house. They tried therapy, but they either couldn't talk or said hateful things that made it worse. I think they both knew they were headed toward divorce. Then the anniversary of my death came. Mom was sitting in her room, silent, when she went into their bedroom, threw her arms around my father, and burst into tears. Surprised, he held her and cried too. It was like all the pain of the past year came out in one burst. After that, they slowly began healing their relationship. She moved back into the bedroom, and they began spending time together, going out on date nights and reconnecting. Soon they were pregnant with another child. The pregnancy went smoothly, and they were soon blessed with a baby girl, Grace. They pampered her and watched her like a hawk, thanking God every day for their second chance. Then one night they walked into her room and found her passed away. SIDS, the doctor said. There was nothing they could have done. It's hard watching them go through it again. I pray they'll make it. But I had no choice. I can't take being alone anymore, and I've always wanted a sister. Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If you dare to explore further, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling tales of horror and the supernatural. Remember, the shadows hold endless mysteries, waiting to be unveiled. Stay tuned for more bone-chilling stories as we continue to traverse the eerie depths of the unknown together. Until next time, may your dreams be free from the haunting echoes of our tales. Or perhaps not.